Here we go, baby. We got Mr.
And
T-Man, Christmas Man, beautiful man, big Eric Brewer. Chandler, why don't you start us off?
yeah, so guys, we got a pretty awesome guest today. We got big Eric Brewer himself, Mr. Novation. I mean, there's so many things you can say, but I'm just gonna let you introduce yourself, Eric.
Yeah, so my name's Eric Brewer. I'm in Pennsylvania. Currently in a couple different markets in and around PA, Maryland, a little bit of upstate New York, and about to open one in South Texas. Been in the business since 2005. Do a little bit of fix and flip, turnkey, own a decent sized rental portfolio, and do quite a bit of wholesaling, Novations, wholesale, stuff like that. So in and around a couple different things, stay pretty active, try and make sure that I have a couple different exit strategies, and just happy to be here with you guys today. We've met through Collective Genius, and honored that you guys asked me to be on the show today.
And thanks for coming.
Yeah,
It's a blessing.
Sure. We appreciate you being
I'm
on
looking
here.
back like 4 months ago, 6 months ago, we're looking at CG. We're like, how can we get close to Eric? Well, we got close to him. We got him on the podcast.
Yeah. You guys going to be in Sarasota? We'll be in Sarasota in a couple weeks, right?
A couple weeks.
We'll be there.
We'll hit it up.
Sarasota's pretty cool.
Yes, sir.
Maybe we go some fishing over there. We're going to play basketball. Let's go play some. Bring your son down.
Dude, that would be nice. I won't play him. I beat him like a year ago in the driveway. I got lucky, got hot from the top of the key from 2.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's it. I'm not playing you again. Like, that's it.
You ended on a high note.
Nah, he'll yeah, I can't
he'll bust you now.
He won't get me back in the court.
We all saw that game winner. That was nasty.
It was pretty nice. He ain't doing that to me. He ain't
ain't
like that in my face.
Yeah. He's not dropping that in your face.
No, not my gym.
Heck yeah.
All right, Eric. So tell us a little bit. I know you mentioned you're in a bunch of different areas of real estate, but give us a short story. How did you get into real estate?
Yes, it's a pretty cool story, actually. I was a bit of a loser out of high school. So when everybody was going off to college and getting jobs and moving on with their life, I was just bouncing around to like different people's places that would let me crash in their basement. And after like 6 months, when everybody had sort of moved on, I looked around and was like, damn, I can't like party with my friends anymore. I guess I better get a job. So I went and got a construction job and did that for like 3 weeks. I remember like it was like middle of July or August. It was hot. Whenever it was hot. And I was demoing the ceiling and this plaster and like shit was just falling down over my face. And inside of my head, I was like, fuck this. Like, this does not work. And I remember I got in my car and I would always turn my car on. And I packed my lunch and put the AC on because it was so hot. And I just got in my car and left and never came back. Yeah. And my dad is my dad and my grandfather were both 30-year military veterans. And I remember talking to my dad. My dad was like, son, just go into the military. It's a great place to get started. Like, you're going to get a college education with the GI Bill. It's going to give you, all these things. I was like, all right. So I went and signed up and joined the Army. Was in the military, served my time, got out, came back home, went and applied for a $7.45 hour job at a car dealership parking cars. I remember I read the job description and it was at a Mercedes and a Toyota dealer. I was like, what? I get paid to drive around Benzes. And so the only thing I had was clothes that I wore in the military, which were military uniforms. And then I was a little, I wore a denim, full denim, overalls and shit. You remember this is back in
you're in the Amish country.
Right? Yeah. Amish, man. So I was part Amish, part hip hop. So
yeah.
And, I had that and then the suit that I wore to my senior prom. So I put on a double-breasted pinstripe suit to go to an interview for a $7 an hour job. And I'll never forget, the guy's name was Mark Smalley. He was the service manager. He walked out and it was in the waiting room at the service area. He walked out and he did a double take and he's like, Eric? And I was like, yeah. He goes, you wore a double-breasted suit to this interview. And I said, yeah, that's all I had. I'm sorry. He's like, you're hired.
Heck yeah.
No interview, no nothing. He hired me. So make a long story short, I worked really hard at the car dealership, got a series of promotions. And within 3 years, I was the general manager. And that gave me the opportunity to, I learned about customer service, sales, hiring, firing, ton of discipline, the value of systems and processes. And so I worked in the car business for almost 8 years, and it was super rewarding. It taught me a lot about business. And then my son was born, and I was working like 85, 90 hours a week. And I was like, this just isn't going to work for me anymore. I was kind of burned out by the car business. I mean, it's retail, right? Like you got to be at the dealership, 80, 85 hours a week. And I just made the decision I wasn't going to do it anymore. Gave my 2 weeks notice, got out of the car business and did some research. And I was like, well, I think I'm pretty good at selling. I'm pretty good at sales. Let me go over and look at real estate. So I looked into real estate. And one of the things I thought that made me, successful in the car business was the understanding of finance. One of the things we did really well was our dealership sold 500-600 cars a month, right? And we did used cars, new cars. But we were really good at was marketing and finance. And the finance side meant that if someone came to us and had less than perfect credit, little money down, maybe they were upside down in their trade, we had a bank for everything, right? And we understood like each bank's requirements, and we could get people in the cars where they had maybe been to 5-6 different dealerships and been turned down. So I'm like, well, if I'm going to get into real estate, let me learn finance first, because I think that's important. So I went and got licensed as a mortgage broker. And in like 2004 and 5, there was a lot of people doing refinances. So I basically was working in a refi shop, cold calling people to refi their mortgage, and made like 26 grand my first month. And I was like, this real estate thing is all right. And I was doing that for about 90 days. And then actually the owner of the car dealership called me and was like, hey, I sort of retired from the car business. And he had always been my mentor. And he was the one that every one of those promotions I talked about, he was the guy that was pushing me to do more and really took me under his wing. And he was like, I heard this radio commercial about flipping houses. And I heard you got out of the car business, and, I'm sort of retired. I'm not really enjoying retirement. I want to do something. Would you like to have lunch and talk about it? So I was like, yeah, of course. Right. Like, this is the guy I looked up to my entire life.
Yeah.
And so we had lunch the next day. He kind of walked me through what he knew about house flipping, and I was in. So we started February of 2005. Had no idea what we were doing. Put up a bunch of billboards, ran television commercials. And our first year, we bought 76 homes. We were all fix and flip. So everything we were doing back then was, renovations and reselling. And in our area, started mostly in the city. Our average price of the property we would sell was around 100 grand. And so that was it. And then we just slowly started building the business. Him and I worked together for about 6 or 7 years in that business. And then he had kind of moved down far enough away from the office where he didn't want to necessarily be active here anymore. So I bought him out, and I've now been in business about 16 years total. And here I am today. So that's the story. I tried to make it as short as I could. I left out a lot of stuff, but tried to.
No, that's a perfect story. You've been in business longer than almost we've been alive. You've been nailing it.
Yeah.
You've been grinding it when we're sucking on pacifiers.
Yeah, man.
Getting that whole milk. But yeah, so you guys started off, you're flipping houses and stuff like that. When you bought your first flip, what was like one of the, did it go smooth? I'm assuming it probably.
No, it went horrible. I remember it was a house that was listed in the MLS. We bought most of our stuff we bought off the MLS, and we had an agent that we had kind of worked with and talked with. It was just getting started, and he was excited about the fact. One of the advantages I had is my partner had a bunch of money. Yeah. Right. Like, we don't talk about that often, but he actually had cash. Right. So like we could spend money on marketing. If a house came along and it was a deal, like wholesaling wasn't even really a thing back in 2005. Right. Like it just wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So like if you were a flipper, you actually had to buy it, renovate it, and sell it. Right. So I was super lucky to have a partner. I mean, at that point, he wasn't even my partner. He was my boss. Right. Like I didn't bring anything to the table other than I knew how to sell. And, so I remember it was a house on Cortland Ave. It was like 606 Cortland Ave, York, PA. I went and walked the house. It was like decent shape. Had a contractor meet me there. He's like 12,000. So I'm doing the numbers. I'm like, damn, 99 minus 12, 20 grand profit. boom, boom, boom. We came up with a number, went back and forth, bought it, met the contractor there, and that was labor only.
Oh,
No supplies.
I didn't even, right? He's like giving me the
yeah.
price, like, so it ended up like we ended up selling it, and I think we made a little bit of money, but it was like, you know, it took like 7 months to do a $20,000
Oh
flip.
gosh.
We overpriced it because we were trying to get our money back, and just got fortunate, and someone came along and bought it, and we made the money. But that was the first house we flipped. Yeah, and well, we generally did pretty well. I mean, after that, we bought a lot of those same properties. Obviously, I learned my lesson about the labor and material. We started to be, you know, a little bit more organized when it came to paperwork and budgets and stuff like that. I went through the process of getting access to the MLS so I could pull my own comps. Started developing relationships with. That was probably one of the bigger things I did back then. Was I spent half my time looking for houses and half my time looking for contractors. Because if, like, you know, if some person looked at a house and it was a 30 grand reno budget, and I got the reno done for 20, I could pay 10 grand more for that house than they could, and I would get the deal.
Yep.
More leverage.
Because banks don't care, right? Like when in our business, when direct to seller, like we buy houses all the time and we don't pay as much as somebody else because we have a better relationship, or we can close quicker, or we contact. A bank does not care. When you're making offers on bank-owned properties, they just go with the highest offer.
Exactly. No
So
relationship.
then our ability to be better at construction and do a high-level renovation for $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000 less than somebody else meant that we would get the deal. So that first year we spend, you know, like I said, about half of our time looking for houses, the other half looking for contractors, and learned a lot about construction in that first year. You know, what to do, what not to do. Probably, you know, fired or broke up with 75% of the contractors that we onboarded. And had to go back out and find replacements. But I'm glad that I did it. Learned an awful lot about construction, and I mean, we do, I mean, 300 renovation projects a year now, between 200 and 300, depending on, you know, there's a lot of stuff where we get a wholesale deal and we decide to renovate it because I can make 60 versus wholesaling it and making 35.
Makes a lot. So what are some of those things that you learned, like you know, some of the higher
put
level?
Everything in writing. So if you look now, we have a work list, right? Like a scope of work for construction that looks a lot like this.
Oh, heck yeah.
Oh, that's a lot of
and there's
Excel.
I mean, it's like literally down to like every light bulb, like every light switch, every outlet, every downspout. We just document everything. It takes probably 8 to 10 days on the front end for us to detail a scope of work, and then all of that, like that was just one page I was showing you of but we have standardized pricing for everything, right? So we don't ask for bids, we send out bids. It's like, here's the scope of work, here's what it pays. For 10 years, we would go, give me a number. They would go walk the house, and you wait 5 days, and they come back and they're like 16.5, and you're like, bro, I'm at 9. Right? And you just wasted those 5 days. And then even if they come down to your number, what I learned is over that time frame of doing construction, in their mind, the whole time they're on that job, you cheated them out of $7,000. So we just constantly have these conversations. But hey, man, this quality's not right. What the hell do you expect for $9 grand? Well, I expect it to be done correctly. Like just because right? Like, so we just documented everything. We stopped asking for bids. We started providing bids and then awarding contracts. If you look at like a lot of schools and government entities, that's the way they do it. Right? So here's the scope. Here's what we pay. If you come at that or below it, we'll award the contract based on your price.
Do you? I know like some of the bigger, like my dad's in like landscape industry, like landscape construction stuff. So like they do the same thing. Like you win a contract or whatever. Do you need to be doing a lot of volume to do that? To have that model?
No, I mean, it's easier for me to hire a contractor at discounted prices because one of the bigger challenges for contractors the majority of the time is two things. One, a lot of their work can be seasonal, right? Like there's patterns just like there is in real estate. Like it's not as busy in the winter for landscaping in the Northeast as it is in the summer. So they try and make 12 months worth of income in 6 to 9 months, right? So like the normal guy that I would hire could build your deck at your house and make $7 grand in 4 weeks. Well, part of the reason he'd make $7,000 is because if he didn't have a sales or marketing process in place, he might not have work for 3 or 4 more weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So he would actually make he'd have to make sure that he made enough money on one job to last him until whenever the next job started. That's why you can have 3 contractors and come out. And if they're smaller companies, you might get a $12,000 bid, a $9,000 bid, and a $4,000 bid. Normally throw away the highest and the lowest, and the one in the middle is more realistic. The lowest guy could be trying to underbid and then change order to piss out of you. That's the other thing. If it sounds too good to be true, it does everything else. Probably is. And the guy that's too high is just taking a shot, and he might have enough work that if you don't give him the job, he doesn't care. If you just give out enough bids at $17,000, someone might just go, okay.
Right? Exactly. I'll take it.
So one of the things that help us is we do so many renovation projects that I can get a guy and he can work for me and go right from one job to the next. So as long as he's being fairly compensated for his time, it's more of an hourly exchange, more so than him trying to run a business, cover his overhead and marketing, do all this other stuff. We've been really successful, what we call chuck in a truck, right? It's like a dude with a pickup truck, or if you don't have a truck, you got to at least have like a hatchback Subaru. Those are like the only two like acceptable. That's the only, right? If dude drives a Subaru and he's got a ladder hanging out of the back, he's probably like a pretty like qualified craftsman. But if he's driving like I'm serious, like I've been 16 years. It's a pickup truck or a hatchback Subaru. It's the only two approved.
Those are only two. Okay, we'll take it. No
white
like vans or anything.
Chevy Malibu or something.
No.
Nah.
Prius.
He will stop returning calls 2 weeks into the job when he got that first check. A lot of that simple stuff that probably seems like common knowledge to contractors and construction companies and general contractors, but I was always a salesperson. I had to learn construction as part of the business, and took some lumps, but got through it. And today, because of our ability to do construction, sometimes we get deals because we'll take on a bigger project, and it's pretty cool. Like our whole turnkey business is really predicated on the ability to be able to do renovations, and that's probably about 50% of our business.
Yeah, let's get in that a little bit, because I noticed you said you're in different avenues. So wholesale, fix and flip, turnkey. Talk to us a little bit. How does your turnkey business? What does it consist of? I mean, and for the listeners,
so it's kind of crazy. I didn't even like know that this whole turnkey like thing was a deal until about 3 years ago in Collective Genius. I'm sitting around saying, this guy's a fix and flipper. This dude does multifamily. This guy's in the storage units. I kept hearing turnkey provider. I was like, what is that? So it was actually a guy by the name of Nathan Brooks, who's a big time turnkey provider out of the Midwest in Kansas City, does a big new construction business. He was like, yeah, dude. He's like, we buy these houses, we fix them up, we put a tenant in them, and then people buy them from us from like all over the country. And I was like, well, what are they paying? He's like, retail, sometimes higher. And I was like, oh. Like, come on, man. Like, sure enough, I started looking into it, and I was like, they typically go by the 1% rule. So if you find an investor that's savvy, right? Most of our customers are from the West Coast, in areas where, their average, our typical customer is a high W-2 income employee. They make north of $200,000 a year, and they live in an area where it's nearly impossible to invest. Right. So if you think about like the entire West Coast, certain portions of the Northeast, like New York City, we have a lot of customers actually from Canada. The price of real estate in Canada is outrageous. So they can't invest locally. So they have to learn how to invest virtually. So the things that they look for is solid construction with durability, because they don't want to get, maintenance to death. And then really, really good property management in place. So the typical rule of thumb is they want to be around 1%. So if I'm selling a house for around 150, they would like the rent to be 1% of that, which is around 1,500. In our area, that's a very reasonable rent to value ratio. So that's it. We buy, renovate. Our best turnkey is a house that we buy for 30, put 55 to 60 into it, which is in our area on a 1,500 square foot row home. There's almost a full gut. So I'm in it all said and done for say 95 to 100. And then they sell for 125 to 135 and rent for about $1,295 a month. Nice. That's in like what I would consider to be like a C to B area. In our kind of city area, they're like 1,500 square foot, 3 to 4 bedroom, 1.5 bath townhomes or row homes, I guess you could call them.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's our
I like
turnkey business. And then we manage them on the back end for them as well.
Yeah. What are some of the ways that you guys are finding these buyers? Is it just
So the buyers,
yeah, the turnkey investors or
two ways. We do a lot of marketing, SEO, things of that sort. You'd be surprised how many people look for invest in turnkey properties. So we get a ton of leads through SEO. I have a couple like informative videos out there that walk through our construction process, our property management process. We talk a lot about like people are really big on like, what's the economy look like in your area? What's the job market look like in your area? What's the two things they want is cash flow and appreciation, or one or the other, right? Like if I can't get both, am I buying it and not cash flowing a lot, but I'm in a speculative area? Like where you guys are in Atlanta, someone could have bought a house there 15 years ago, break even every month, but in the right area, it's up 10x in value, right? Like
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So they look for a lot of like, what's job growth look like, stuff like that. But in our area, it's predominantly cash flow. Like we just don't have a huge appreciating market. Like if you look at values, between now and 10 years ago, they're probably up 25%. And 20 of that happened in the last 24 months, right? But it's a big cash flow market, right? Because how many places can you buy a house for $125,000 and have it cash flow? Not many.
Exactly.
They're fully renovated, right?
Yeah.
So most of our, and then the other big part is we partner with a lot of aggregators, people that like do education, and they're basically marketing companies, and they teach people how to invest in real estate, and then they refer the client to us for a referral fee. The bigger ones that we work with is RPC Capital. It's Ron Phillips. I actually met him through Collective Genius. He's been doing that for about 15 years. He aggregates about 500 transactions a year. And then another company called Narada. They're based out of California. They're just huge on education, networking. They put out a ton of content to teach people how to passively invest in income producing properties. And then people will make the decision to say, okay, go find me a qualified operator. So I had to go through like a pretty heavy screening process to get approved. They'd look into our financials, our assets, our property management, our renovation standards, and then they go, okay, you're an approved turnkey provider for this particular demographic. And then it's relatively exclusive. Like I own the southeast area of Pennsylvania. So within about 70 miles of here, someone wants to buy a property through that company, I'm the authorized operator.
Heck yeah.
Oh, that's sweet.
How many people are in your including, your turnkey company, including like all the, I guess, property management and all that stuff?
Just shy of 50.
God bless. So 50 people. And is that two companies, property management and?
No, we actually, so that's excluding, we merged with a massive property management company here about 6 months ago. They manage over 4,000 units, which I thought was a lot when we managed 400 or 500. And we were at the point where I was going to have to, there's this crazy thing that happens at property management is most people, the margins have got, compressed so much. Like there's property management companies out there managing for like a flat fee to 5 or 6%. And the problem is, until you get to scale on property management at 5 or 6%, you're really limited on what you can pay people salary wise. You're really limited on facilities. You're limited on support. You're limited on all these things. So generally, property management companies suck because there's one person managing 5 people's work, their maintenance, their bookkeeping, their tenant placement, their collections, right? So like all of those things suffer. So we made a decision, like, listen, we can't compromise on these core things like vacancies kill you and renovation turns kill you, right? So how do we reduce those things? When we figured it out, there was some key personnel that we needed. We're like, we have to be at 10% or 12% to be able to do this. So we just made a decision that 10% was going to be our management fee. And then we would be able to properly staff. And turns out nobody bitched about it, right? As long as they were still getting their margin, they didn't care if they paid 5% or 50% property management. But what they did care about is my property occupied for 12 months out of the year. Am I not getting nickeled and dime on maintenance repairs? And if I have a tenant move out, how quickly are you getting it renovated, cleaned, and then re-rented again so that I'm not going 2 or 3 months? So once we realized the amount of staff that we would have to continue to add, I was like, let's reconsider this for a second, right? And even at 10%, like property management just does not make a lot of money. If it does, they normally make it on tenant placement and maintenance. And then for me, because I'm selling to these clients, I was in this conflicting space of like, am I trying to profit as a property manager, or do I want to make sure that my clients are getting the best possible value? And it's really hard to do both of those. And so then when I partnered with a company that was managing 4,000, 5,000 properties, they were already at the scale to where they could do that stuff at a reduced cost and still give these people exceptional service. So to me, I gave up all of the opportunity for profit through property management in the best interest of saying, hey, these people are going to get a superior service. I don't have to worry about, margins and profit and all that stuff on the property management side. And I still get a referral. So like, I get a referral just like you would referring business to a broker. And honestly, I make about the same amount of money now without owning property management through a referral relationship as I did managing 20 plus employees and taking on all that responsibility, which is a lot. I mean, we were collecting $75,000, $80,000 a month in rent. And then that's a massive accounting and bookkeeping responsibility. You have escrows, security deposits, utilities.
Yeah.
And I just thought about it. I was like, all right, like buying homes and selling homes, we make X amount of dollars for our time. Bookkeeping, utilities, and property management, we make this amount. I'm going to put my time and energy into this more lucrative part of the business and refer this business out to someone that's much more willing to do that type of work. So I'm not a huge fan of property management. Unfortunately, it's like a necessary evil, though. It's got someone got to do it.
Got to get done by someone.
Steve was telling me about that too. Steve Trang, he's like, bro, no one. I mean, he's like, you're in a hole if you start a property management company without having scale, like thousands of units.
In 2 years, I lost $160,000.
There you go.
Jeez, yeah, don't do that.
Happy to be out of that business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So we have a person though that manages the property manager. They're a liaison between all of our turnkey clients and the property manager.
Gotcha. Like a rep.
So every time we know 90 days before a tenant moves out, we start marketing it. We prepare for the renovation turn. We that relationship for us works much, much better.
Gotcha. No, it makes sense. Actually, something that we've been dealing with another business we had. Like we were looking at it, the same thing. We're spending time on pennies instead of spending the time on the dollars. Like in our wholesaling business, we're trying to grow it, but instead we're focused on this other business that's only making us way less money.
Yeah.
Why would we do that? With our time.
It's easy to get caught up into, man. I've owned a construction company, a property management company. You look at all these other things, you're like, oh, I can make, I'm doing this, I can make this much money on that. And what we don't calculate a lot of times is how much of a distraction it can be. And if we just reallocated that time to our core business, we would make 10, 20, 50 times more money than we would.
Exactly. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I like that. So what does your real estate business look like? I mean, you said you got like 50, just shy of 50 people. So I guess.
Yeah. So we are, we have 12 people in construction, from estimators. We have 3 VAs that, like the scope of works that I was set, we create that scope. They plug it into all of the software that creates the budget. It communicates and sends it over to our local Lowe's and Home Depot. And then it takes that scope of work and then does a material selection, so that typically within 1 or 2 days, it builds out a material list with a cost for that, which we obviously need for the budget. They're constantly doing the onboarding and recruiting of any new contractors. So we got between 10 and 12 people total in construction, 7 acquisitions agents, 5 ISA lead manager inside sales, 2 just data people that take notes and manage our CRM data migrations from different lead providers to make sure that everything It's updated in each calendar in our CRM. We have a full-time data analyst and Salesforce programmer. You might have met, I think you guys might have seen Data Dave on our Zoom call.
Oh, yeah.
Big Dave, that guy's definitely a
big brain Dave.
Salesforce guy.
He does all of our analytics for our marketing and everything as well. Sort of like the in-house IT guy as well.
Yeah.
So
one thing you hit on, sorry,
people, and then everybody else is sales and operations.
Gotcha.
The one thing you hit on, you said you have less inside sales than you do acquisitions agents. I think it's like kind of opposite, and even our thinking too is like, how do you think about that? Like, or what's their roles? Like, how do they differ?
That we have less ISAs than, so we do. So if you think about like the timing, right? Like it takes like 30 minutes to have a quality phone call with a client, where with an acquisitions agent for us, because we do it in person, like literally if you buy it, it's a 2-hour appointment.
Okay.
Our process that we teach, we shouldn't even be talking about price until about the 45 to 60 minute mark. We don't like literally. So our approach, like when it comes to acquisitions is, and I'll share this with you guys, right? But like, if you run an acquisitions appointment correctly, you should literally have the ability to make an insulting offer on the first call. Like you should be insulted by my first number. So then here's the problem. How do I make an insulting offer without getting kicked out of the house? Or in your case, or anybody that's watching that does it virtually, without getting hung up on? There's only one way, right? So let's say, Gino and I are friends and we see each other, Sarasota, Florida, and I don't like his hat. Because him and I have a relationship and we're friends, I can say, dude, I think your hat's bullshit. It's ugly. And he's going to go, man, shut up. And he's going to, we're going to talk about it. He's going to tell me why he thinks his hat's cool. And I'm going to tell him why I think it sucks. Right. But we're going to have good conversation. And then we're going to probably land somewhere where he may shift my thinking a little bit. And I might go, yeah, now you mentioned it. I think it's a pretty cool hat. Or he's going to shift a little bit in my direction. Right. So if you think about that, like in the aspect of making an offer, like if you want the ability to make an insulting offer, you have to build a relationship that allows you to be able to make that offer and not get kicked out of the house or punched in the face.
Exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm. So for us, we feel that process, and have found that takes about 40 to 60 minutes, depending on the size of the house. And of course, some customers are just a little more chatty than others. So if you think about that, an acquisitions agent, we want them to have about 2 appointments a day. You have about 4 hours realistically of actual table time, talk time. And then depending on commute, they might spend another hour to 2 hours on the road. So you're at 6 to 8 hours commitment each day by 2 appointments. An acquisitions agent can make 100 phone calls, 50 connects, have 30-minute quality conversations. So we found that it's typically almost a 2-to-1 ratio acquisitions to ISAs, depending on how efficient they are. But we've tried to scale up with acquisitions lately. We do some outbound prospecting. We communicate with like auctioneers, attorneys, and a lot of the acquisitions agent do some of that. That's why we have that balance between inside sales and acquisitions agents.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think that's important. And like one of the things we were talking about the other day is like everyone talks about MAOs, but they're not really talking about the LAO.
Dude, so that's the thing, right? Like with and it's harder. Like I know from a virtual perspective, one of the things I think that works to your advantage in some of these major metro markets is you can have someone that bought a house 6 to 7 years ago, bought it for $140,000, and you maybe offer them 180 and they owe 100, right? And for you, that's a really good offer, right? And you may be able to turn around and sell it for 215. That just doesn't generally happen in our market because we don't have appreciation. So I should go back and look at this, but I guarantee you 75% of our transactions, we buy homes for less than the owner bought them for. And the average time that they've owned the property is in excess of 15 years.
Shoot.
So that's like, if you think about that, right? So you're sitting and you're talking to Bob and Mary Palumbo, and they bought the house 17 years ago for 145, and Chandler sits down at their kitchen table and has the audacity to offer them 76.
Oh, you gotta have something big.
You gotta have a relationship, right? Like, So, but that's the reality of the situation. And maybe our max allowable offer is closer to 100. But like one of the things we're really big on is even if we don't obviously buy it at that original price anchor or starting offer, we know that where we start has a direct correlation to where we end up, right? Like it's actually called anchoring. If you think it's a real thing that happens in our brain. If someone says 60 and we were thinking 100, our brain automatically shifts closer to that 60, and it plants the seed of doubt that our number may have been unrealistic to begin with. So we just know that starting at that lower number is going to give us a better opportunity to end up at closer or maybe even below that max allowable offer. But we're always trying to think about what's the lowest number that we can offer this person without literally insulting them, getting kicked out of the house, and still being able to recover and come up in price without losing, all of our integrity. So.
Heck yeah.
That's awesome.
I like that. So I guess you explained a little bit about your real estate team. What are you guys currently doing per month in the wholesale fix and flip? How many deals? Just so the listeners understand.
35-ish. I think if we hit all of our goals, it works out to be 36. So we have like a certain amount of turnkeys that we're going to do a month. I think is 17, wholesale 15, and then anywhere from 5 to 7 novations. So if we outperformed each of those sort of buckets that we have, we would hit 40. But typically we end up somewhere between like 31 and 35.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Big man over here. Big man in Mr. Pennsylvania. Should be up there. But Eric, tell us though. Yeah,
we've
it's a lot.
looked at, like, I don't think I can do it anymore.
You're gonna have to get a replacement for yourself. You might have to call him Mr. Palumba. Come up there. Be the mini Eric Brewer.
I already have a replacement. I don't work anymore, dude.
Tell us about that.
I got a great
that's a big
team,
thing.
man. I have a COO that's badass.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Man, I tell you, so it's funny, right? Like I hear a lot of people, most of the people, so I do some coaching and consulting, which you guys know. And what I find is there's this startup phase, right? Where typically the operator does everything, right? They're in lead management, acquisitions, marketing, finance, dispo, construction. And then you get some money and you can hire 1 or 2 people, 10 people, 15 people. But then we're still operating in some type of like executive level management position, right? And then eventually we grow to a place where it's like we can actually hire managers to manage the managers. And one of the things I learned is that when I went from like this owner operator, right, to the level where you guys are now, we talked about it, you have a leadership team, you have people that are responsible for key parts of your company. Everything that we literally learned and did to get us to a place to where we could have enough money to hire people, we almost have to completely abandon that thinking, right? Like you have to then become more of a leader, less of a manager. Like, how do I empower these people to make decisions? How do I encourage people to make decisions in my absence, but do it on a based on a set of parameters and guiding principles so that they don't make the wrong decision, but they also don't sit around and wait for me to make every decision. Right.
That's big.
So one of the things that I learned is that a lot of people ask me like, well, what's your job description look like for a sales manager? What's your job description look like for a lead manager and a COO and all this stuff? And I'm like, bro, the first thing you need to think about is what your new job description looks like.
Yeah.
Right. When you stop doing that stuff and hire somebody to do it, how's your interaction look with them? How are they clear on what their goals are? What do they do if they have a problem? How do they know if they're underperforming, doing just a good enough job? Or how do you know if they're outperforming or doing more than expected of them? Like, how do you measure all of that? So I think a lot of people focus on the job descriptions of the people in their organizational structure, but they don't think enough about what their new job description will be. Like when I hired my COO, no one trained me on how to be a CEO. Right?
Yeah.
So I ended up like meddling in all of these departments, drifting back into making decisions that other people were supposed to be making. And then it becomes extremely disruptive. It jeopardizes the authority that these people are supposed to have with your team. It makes them wonder where their authority starts and stops, because occasionally you'll drift back in to make a decision that they thought was theirs. And it may be different than what they would have done. Doesn't mean it was right or wrong. It was just different. So now they're second guessing. Well, I would have done that differently. The boss did it this way. I better check with him or wait for him. Right. So I was a horrible CEO. I would have fired myself. And it wasn't until I had to go back and relearn how to be a CEO that I was able to then allow these people to actually do their job. What it ended up doing is I hired a bunch of people that were qualified to be leaders. And then all I wanted them to do was take direction from me and go do shit that I told them to do. And it was funny. I was reading a book, and it's a really good book if you haven't read it. It's called Multipliers, right? And in that book, they talk about we either are multipliers and diminishers. I was a horrible diminisher, right? And it talks about like this thing. It says when we interview people, we hire the best and brightest, right? If you interview 3 people, are you going to hire the smartest, the dude in the middle, or the guy that can barely sign his name? You're going to hire the smartest guy. Yeah. And then we typically hire the smartest guy, and we tell him how to fucking do everything. Why'd you hire the smartest person?
Yeah.
And then tell them how to do everything, right? And then unknowingly what we do when we tell them how to do everything is we actually suppress their ability to make suggestions or problem solve on their own. Then eventually they'll leave. Like super smart people will leave a diminisher because that's when they'll say like, well, there was no room for growth. And like, how many times have you heard that, right? If you had a friend or a relative or someone you knew was like, there's just no, do you ever wonder what that means? Well, that's what it means. A lot of times there's plenty of advancement opportunities, but they don't feel like there was opportunities for them because they weren't allowed to make decisions. Their opinion didn't really count, right? That book also talks about like 75% of employees say that they're underpaid and underutilized. Oh, and overworked. Those 3 things: underpaid, underutilized, and overworked. How can you be overworked and underutilized?
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
Right? Because they're working on things that they don't want to necessarily be working on. So that's the biggest thing for me that I learned in growing a business is when you get to that phase, you really have to pivot towards being more of a leader, less of a manager. And it sounds easy. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, I think we're
going
test.
through it right now. we definitely
took the test, and I was like the worst score. What was I? A 20?
You're like a 39 or something.
Yeah.
But that's what it took for you to get to where you are, right? Like you had to be a diminisher. You had to be obsessive. You had to be a micromanager, so to speak, to start a business from literally nothing.
Yeah.
Right? To get it to the place to where these people have a place to call work. But we quickly have to abandon all of that thinking and methodology almost 180 degrees. Like being a leader is almost the exact opposite of being a manager, right? Like if you read that book, Multipliers, like I'm reading this book and like, oh my God, I'm the worst freaking dude to work for ever. Like this book's written about me. I am Donnie Diminisher, right? It's like, Donnie horrible.
So what?
It's like I was embarrassed. I started walking around the office apologizing to people.
So what is a leader?
The other, you remember that in the book where they talk about the banyan tree?
We didn't read the book yet.
We just heard from Jimmy Freeland. We just took some hits.
You got to read it,
man. I'm reading a book. I don't know if have you read the Dichotomy of Leadership by Jocko Willink, or how do you say his last name?
No, but I'm a big subscriber to Jocko. So he was a guest speaker at CG 2 years ago.
Really?
And his presentation hit home with me, and he teaches a philosophy called extreme ownership. And my takeaway from that was, and I share this with anybody that's willing to listen, is literally as a leader, your initial thought has to be take the blame for everything and the credit for nothing. So like if there's an issue inside of your organization with performance or someone's communication or their attendance, like you literally have to like reflect inward and say, you know what, as a leader, I could have done a better job. I wasn't clear about my expectations, or I didn't do a great job training them, or I'm not giving you the support that I need. And what his presentation is, he literally, when he trained leaders of Navy SEALs, he was like, I'm telling you, the one deciding factor between the greatest leaders that I've ever met and the guys that were average is their willingness to take responsibility for everything. So he calls them extreme ownership. Like, even if it's not your fault, find a way to make it your fault. And the response will be, A, your people will respect you and they'll follow you, right? And B, you're always going to find something that you could have done better. Always.
Yeah.
Right? Which requires a tremendous amount of humility. But I'm dude, I remember sitting there watching him talk, and it was like, damn, okay. It feels unnatural when you're looking across somebody and you're like, you messed up, right? And you say, I messed up. Like, you're thinking you messed up and you say, I messed up. It's hard to do, but I can tell you what happens most of the time is they'll say, nah, boss, man, that's all on me, dude. I should have done a better job. You know what? I'm gonna make sure that I start coming in on Mondays 10 minutes early, because I know how important that stuff is, and I want to make sure that I get it done in time for our meeting. So no, it's definitely not on you. I appreciate you, being willing to take responsibility, but it's all on me, man. And then when they leave, right? I told, forget who it was, but I was like, people, if you don't allow people to talk to you, they'll talk about you.
Mm-hmm.
That's
right?
big.
So like, if you're constantly the kind of boss, you know what I'm saying? Like, so like you have to say, hey man, like, obviously I did an unacceptable job as your manager. And I know how important it is for you to do a good job. And we missed our mark last week when it comes to contracts. And obviously I must have to drop the ball somewhere, whether it was with marketing spend or training or giving you the right staff. I feel terrible that I let you down. I just want to talk through it so we can both figure out how we can get back on track next week. And then the response that you get from that person is, rather than trying to defend their position because they're concerned about whether or not they have job security, or whether or not you're being fair, or whether or not the CRM calculated contracts correctly, they'll actually have an open dialogue with you, right, about what happened. And they're not going to talk about you when you leave, right? Not in a negative light anyway.
They're going to say, he listened to me.
They'll respect you as a leader, that you were willing to take responsibility. And then if you think about that, after that, I was like, well, think about, like, some of the greater athletes or coaches or people of our generation. Like, you got guys like, Bill Belichick or Tom Brady that win these MVPs and all these awards. And like, the first thing they talk about is my team, my line, but then when they fail, it was, as a quarterback, I got to do a better job. Bill Belichick, just this last week, I don't know if you saw the interview, but they lost. And he was like, we didn't coach good enough. We didn't play defense good enough. We didn't play offense good enough. And he took full responsibilities, right? Like, that's our job as coaches, to prepare our team to be ready to play. And we just failed as coaches to get our people ready to play. We're going to do a better job next week.
I like that. It's a big talks.
Because people will correct you real quick. Like, I had this happen just the other day.
Rescue you.
They'll like, I should have, like, that's my bad. I should have reminded you or something like that. Like, no, it wasn't your bad. I forgot completely. It was on me. That whole thing is my deal. But yeah, so I mean, I love that idea and philosophy as well. So the dichotomy of leadership is Jocko's book, and it basically talks about all of his ideas of leadership, and it's like how they can go. That you need balance, because like you can have too much ownership. Like, one chapter, for example, was like own everything but own nothing. So it's like talking about decentralized leadership, and like, you own that you could have done more, but you also help them know that they could have done better. So like, by talking through it, like, hey, like, sure, I could have trained you more, but then they'll be like, hey, yeah, I dropped the ball here, but you got to let them have that ownership. And he's also like, you have to make sure that your team has something they can own, because if you own everything and no one owns anything, and they have no ownership, there's no ability for them to have extreme ownership. So you can't expect them to have it. So, but there's a lot of different things. Like
in that presentation, he gave us a good sort of point of reference. And he was like, one of the ways you can get people to own stuff is when someone brings you an idea, typically as leaders, we have a slightly better way to go about it. And we feel compelled, right, to add our little touch to it, or add our suggestion, or make this little improvement. Well, the problem is that if 75% of the plan is theirs and 5% is yours, they consider the whole thing your idea. They don't get credit or take ownership of the plan. So his point was, if someone comes to you with a plan that's 75% likely to be successful, shut up. Don't make a suggestion. Unless it's critical to the success, right? If it's just you trying to tweak it and improve it, let it alone. He said, because the difference between a successful mission and a failed mission is that 30%. Whether it's 70% or 90%, something's going to happen, and it's going to be a hurdle or it's going to be a problem. And if they own it because it's their plan, they'll figure it out. If you added your little 10% in there and they had to go back and redraft it, when that problem comes up, they're going to go, I knew this was going to happen. I told Chandler, but he insisted that we do it this way. Right?
Exactly.
So, but it's hard because when someone brings something, you're like, well, that sounds cool, but just do this.
Yeah.
Right. But then it becomes your idea. So they don't own it anymore. But it's so hard, man. That's why I said it's the most, and it's this never ending cycle, right? Like, it's not like, I went through the leadership thing. I got that all figured out. It's a never ending constant opportunity to improve. Yeah.
For sure. And I love this leadership.
I'm a big fan of Jocko.
I love this leadership talk, but I want to hit something too, because we got 10 minutes left, about what Big Eric.
Yeah.
I recognized him, how I found him through Steve, but talking about the Brewer Method. If you could, we got the people on here. Eric, talk to us about what is the Brewer Method, what's Novations, how can they increase their deal, their offers, how they can do all these good stuff. I want to make sure we get that in there.
So here's the one thing that I realize is Novations. A lot of people have this skewed perception of what it is. There's some people out there that Novations, I think you guys might even ask me, or someone asked, and it was like, like it stays in their name, and then you do the renovate. And I was like, no, I don't do any renovations on my Novations. Like, what our approach is, we basically buy at wholesale, but exit at retail through a Novation, right? So if you get a property under contract for 140, but you include the Novation language in your contract and your presentation, it now gives you the ability to list and sell that property on the MLS to a retail buyer with FHA, VA, USDA, NEA financing, because there is no seasoning. You're not a cloud on title. It's a provable transaction to go from A to C, where an insurance company and a lender would not lend or insure a title policy with an assignment. It is not an allowable transaction with a government entity mortgage, and a Novation is. So once I realized that, I was like, well, hold on for a second. If I can buy it wholesale and exit at retail, what about all the people that are in the middle that want like 10% less than retail, 15% less than retail? Can I offer them 190 if retail is 219? And the answer is yes. So what I found was, if you think about, like, normally if this is like a seesaw, right? And you imagine, like, if my head in the middle is the balancing ball, right? Like, as condition declines, motivation increases, right? Yep. So normally as investors, what do we buy? Shitty houses. So it's a crappy business to be in, right? It's like every house that we buy has got a blue tarp on the roof, mold in the basement, kicked in back door, and all the seals are busted in the windows, right? So like all of the people that I was meeting with, making offers, we were really good friends, but we didn't make a deal with. It's because the condition was pretty good. Motivation was kind of like there, but not super motivated. I'm like, well, I'd like to make a deal on those. I don't want to just be the guy that buys shitty houses. Can I buy nice houses too? Right? And the answer is, with Novation, yes, you can buy this. So when you talk about everybody in the wholesaling talks about ARV, max allowable offer, reno, all these formulas. The formula for Novations is what's retail value as is, right? Minus commissions, minus your projected profit. That's how much you can offer. So do this math real quick, right? So on Chandler, 230 house, the 30K renovation. What are you paying?
230 times. Well, do you do flat fee listing? We will. Minus 30K. Minus 20.
Let's say traditional investor.
Yeah. So
it's paying
165.
So on a Novation, here's the thing about a 30K.
Traditional investor.
Even less.
Yeah,
way less.
That was Novation.
165. Right. Yeah. So, but now I can offer 200 for that house, because a 30K renovation is probably just cosmetic. That's right. So, and in today's market, especially, homes that need cosmetic repairs are selling for ARV. It's just,
For sure. Yeah.
it's AV. The R doesn't even matter anymore. It's as value, not after repaired value.
Yeah.
Right. And particularly for FHA buyers or finance buyers that don't have 40% down, they're getting beat out on all the rehabbed houses because there's multiple offers. People are doing appraisal waivers, all that crap. FHA buyers can't buy renovated homes. They're getting their teeth smashed in. So on a Novation, you can pay the seller $200, listed in the MLS for $229. You got a flat fee listing in your case where you're paying what, $5,000 between buyer's agent and selling agent?
I think it's like 2.5%.
Yeah, plus the flat fee. So just say it's $5,000, $229. Maybe it sells for $225. $5,000 to sell it. That's $220. You paid $200. You make $20,000. Never take title. Never bring cash to the table. You're doing a wholesale style transaction at retail numbers. That's an Ovation with no renovation. So what I call it is it's revenue without rehab, right?
I like that. And that's what we've implemented. I mean, we started doing that. Everything we go on the MLS, and even if we can't novate it, which we try to, but even if we can't, we'll just double close on it. I mean, that's just
and then so the cool thing about that, right, is like for Novations in some areas, you can't list your wholesale deals in the MLS unless you are the owner. Like equitable title in some states, this doesn't work. On a Novation, when there's a limited power of attorney involved, which we use in over 50% of our deals, you're listing it on behalf of the owner. So Novations actually allow you to list your wholesale deals in the MLS in states where you're not allowed to do it with an assignment contract.
So like every part of that except the part where I had to do the math.
But it's much easier. For on a Novation, you take retail minus commissions minus profit. That's your offer.
Yeah.
This for Darius too from a Brewer Method too. Leaving it. I love it, guys.
Yeah, we do 75 of those a year.
I love it.
What kind of like access agreement are you coming to with the seller for the?
It's also we do we have like a whole package of like listing it. You know, they sign the listing agreement up front unless we have a POA. They're signing an addendum that says there's going to be a lockbox and sign. It's going to be on Zillow. You may see it on the MLS. Your friends may call you and tell you that they saw on Realtor.com for $100,000 more than what we're paying you. Like that's the other thing I love about it, right? Is it's
transparent.
We're like with a normal wholesale deal, you know, there's people that I'm bringing my contractor through, my partner, like all of this like sketchy shit. Like you're right up front. It's like, hey, Gino, I wanted to be at 80. You're stuck at 100. The only way I could possibly pay you something like that is if we were to, make a deal with you where you were a little bit flexible in terms, and that would allow me to pay you more money. You're open to hearing something about that? Of course, they're like, yeah. So basically, for me, time is money, right? If I close on your property, I then am committed to renovating it and then guessing what the end user is going to see value in. They may want a new kitchen. They may want a new roof. They may like a finished basement. I don't know. It's a big guessing game. I'd like to take some of the guesswork out of it. If you agree to do this deal with me, I pay you 100. I'm going to list it on the market at 125 as is. I'm also going to let them know if they want a new kitchen, they could buy it for 135. Or if they'd like to get it fully renovated, I could sell it to them for 189. So now I can bring a property to market with 3 different options, all of which allow me to make a small but reasonable profit over and above what I've paid you. And you still get cash as is, no inspections, no fees. Is that something you'd be interested in?
Exactly.
Right? It's like a little bobble. Yeah. And then, so it's going to be in the MLS. We're going to need to set up access. What works for you with showings? It's great because there's no surprises, right? It's like they knew up front that we were going to list it and sell it in its current condition at a price that's higher than what we were paying them. And then showings aren't a surprise. There is no surprise when they get the settlement. People are like, well, don't they care that? Why wouldn't they say I'll just list it? Because they actually want to do business with me.
Exactly.
Right? And they don't want to go through inspections. I'm actually handling all that. If it needs a handrail or peeling paint or a cracked sidewalk or the furnace needs serviced or a roof cert, we handle all of that. In exchange, we get the upside. So
sure, Lenny's setting up too right here. Brewer Method. Lenny's in the group as well.
Big Lenny. Yeah, and honestly, you're just kind of a high paid realtor because a lot of realtors don't know how to do a deal like that. They don't know that can even be done to list a house.
Yeah, so and then here's the other cool part, right? You're actually bringing a segment, even if that person listed and they're like, it's as is, cash or conventional only. So now you have a decent property that goes to the MLS that all of these financed buyers miss out on. So to us, it's like, dude, I'm adding value to the market. I'm actually bringing a property to market that's a little bit lower than, let's say, fully rehabbed property. And I'm still giving FHA buyers and people that want to get inspections the option to purchase it. And then I'm going to handle that crap that comes in between that freaks every homeowner out, that they don't want to deal with because of the inconsistency of appraisals and home inspections and all of these things. And in exchange, I get paid.
Exactly.
It's a fair trade, right? So like now we're selling all this inventory and bringing all this inventory to these FHA buyers that want to get inspections that otherwise would either end up in our hands as a wholesale deal, right to a cash buyer, and now goes on the market as a flip for 300. Right now they can buy it for 260 or 239, whatever we said. They can do a little bit of sweat equity, still get a home inspection, use an FHA loan. We do $5,000 worth of inspection bullshit or $1,000, whatever, right? It's normally home inspection stuff. And we make 15, 25 grand. And the homeowner got an as-is transaction, but got higher than MAO.
Yeah.
Right?
It's crazy.
So higher than wholesale.
It is a win-win situation for everybody, which is often talked about, but it's not really the case.
Exactly. And Eric, tell the listeners, where can they go to learn more about this too?
So we sell an entire course that has the entire library of documents we've built over the last 11 years that I've been doing this. We have a couple hours of webinars, Q&A. I've actually partnered with Steve Trang. So we do a once a month call where we dive into some sales training, some scripting about how to overcome normal objections with sellers. We have an entire onboarding document that tells you how to explain these deals to listing agents, how to explain it to buyer's agents, and how to explain it to title companies so that you don't run into problems days before settlement. You can see all of that information and purchase that education at brewermethod.com.
Legendary. And tell us, Eric, just up front, I know we paid for it last year though, this time. How much is it right now?
$5,000.
So $5,000, guys. $5,000. You do one deal, just one more deal right there. And just say your average deal size in Atlanta right now, we're at 25 grand, but let's say it's at 15 grand, the average. One deal, you're going to make 10 grand off of your.
I tell you what, dude, it's funny. I'm working with someone right now to expand our offerings where like you can buy the contract for $1,000. You can buy the POA for 400. So I'm working on this pretty big deal, but he's like, literally, dude, he's like, I've been in this business for 25 years. He's like, nothing like this has come along since the assignment agreement 100 years ago.
Yeah,
he's
exactly.
Like, if you think about the assignment agreement, right? And there's thousands of educators out there that literally sell a copy of their assignment agreement and then build an entire coaching curriculum behind it. This is the next thing, right? And then the bigger thing for me is it quite frankly allows you to pay more money for a house. There's no other piece of education that I know of that allows you to pay 20% more than everybody else in your market and still make the same amount of money and not have to bring cash or have lines of credit or be in construction to be able to do the deal. It's a wholesale style transaction at retail numbers.
It's insane. And I know we're over the hour now, Eric, but is there anything you want to leave the listeners with?
I don't think so, man. If there's anything I can do to help you guys, I'm always available. I appreciate you having me here. That hour flew by quickly, but
yeah, when you're having fun.
Well, when you ask me how I get started and how I get to today, as you pointed out, Gino, I am old. So like my intro used to take 5 minutes. Now that I'm 46 years old, it takes like 25. So we were halfway through the show and just actually got to me getting out of the Army.
I like that. Thanks for your service. I got the Navy shirt on.
I love it. My brother just got out of the Navy.
Really?
Yeah, nice.
What was this?
He is going to do. He's going to be a state police officer.
Wow.
Crazy time to think about being a police officer, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But, God bless him.
Hey,
and Eric,
the
listeners, viewers here, how can they reach out to you?
You can find me on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. My Instagram's eBrewer75. Facebook is just Eric Brewer. You'll see I'm in Pennsylvania. And I'm crazy enough to give people my cell phone number. It's 717-818-3694. I'll just block you if you're weird.
No pics.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, there's a guy
No.
that I'm going into business in upstate New York with a guy that got my cell phone number off the Steve Trang show. We'll
Really?
be in business together in upstate New York, January 1.
Oh, heck
That's
yeah.
crazy.
So
It's awesome.
You guys, don't be no weird
Yeah.
pictures after.
Yeah, no
7
weird
o'clock.
links, nothing.
I got a link I'm going to send you, Eric, after
Yeah,
this. It's
there's
a good
there's
one.
a good link we got.
I got a link. I think you would
Cool.
like it. But anyway, thanks again,
All
Eric.
right.
Thanks for coming on. And for sure, we
Yeah.
appreciate you.
I'll catch up with you guys tomorrow. And